Promise me you'll find him." Those were the words that changed Nurse Rachel Morgan's life forever. The elderly man in room 304 was dying, and his final wish was simple: see his son one last time and say the 3 words he should have said 30 years ago. But when Rachel finally tracked down the son, his response shocked her. "Let him die alone, just like he left me. Stay with me until the very end, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about forgiveness, family, and the power of words we leave unspoken." If stories like this move you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Heart Told Stories for more incredible true narratives. Now let's begin. Rachel Morgan had been a nurse at County General Hospital for 12 years. At 38 years old, she had seen just about everything a hospital could throw at her. She had held the hands of patients taking their first breaths and their last. She had celebrated miraculous recoveries and mourned devastating losses. She had learned, through years of experience, to maintain professional distance while still providing compassionate care. It was a delicate balance, caring deeply about patients without letting their stories consume her. Rachel had watched too many nurses burn out from becoming too emotionally invested. She had promised herself early in her career that she would be kind, attentive, and professional, but she would not take patients' problems home with her. But that professional distance came from a place of pain. Rachel knew what it felt like to lose someone without getting to say goodbye. Her own father had died of a heart attack when she was 23. Just months after a terrible argument they'd had about her decision to become a nurse instead of following him into the family law practice. They had stopped speaking, both too proud to reach out, both waiting for the other to apologize first. Then one Tuesday morning, Rachel got a call from the hospital. Her father had collapsed at work. By the time she arrived, he was already gone. No goodbyes, no reconciliation, no chance to tell him that she loved him despite their differences. Just permanent silence where there should have been words. That loss had shaped her entire career. She became a nurse partly to honor the profession her father had dismissed, but mostly because she had learned the hard way how precious time was, how quickly it could run out. She had promised herself she would help her patients make peace before the end, help them avoid the regret that still haunted her 15 years later. That promise lasted until she met James Thompson, when it transformed from professional duty into personal mission. James was admitted to County General on a Tuesday evening in late September. He was 68 years old, a black man with graying hair and kind eyes that carried decades of sorrow. The diagnosis was stage 4 pancreatic cancer, too advanced for treatment. The doctors gave him 2 weeks, maybe 3 if he was lucky. Rachel was assigned to the oncology ward that month, and room 304 became part of her regular rounds. When she first met James, she was struck by how quiet he was. Many terminal patients went through predictable stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But James seemed to have skipped straight to a profound sadness that went deeper than fear of death. He had no visitors that first week, no family members, no friends, no one. Just James, alone in room 304, staring out the window at the parking lot below. On her 3rd day caring for him, Rachel brought his evening medication and found him looking at an old photograph. It was worn and faded, the edges softened from years of handling. The image showed a younger James, probably in his late 30s, standing beside a teenage boy. Both were smiling, the boy wearing a basketball jersey, James's arm around his shoulders in a protective, proud gesture. "Your son?" Rachel asked gently, dispensing the medication into a small paper cup. James looked up at her, and Rachel saw tears forming in his eyes. "Marcus, he was 16 in that picture. That was the last good day we had together." Rachel wanted to ask more, but years of experience told her to let patients share at their own pace. She handed James the medication and water, waiting patiently. "That was 30 years ago," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Haven't seen him since he was 18. Haven't heard his voice in all that time." Rachel felt her heart tighten. 30 years without seeing your child. The pain in James's voice was palpable, a grief that had been carried for 3 decades. "What happened?" she asked, pulling up the visitor's chair beside his bed. James took his medication and sat back against the pillows, still clutching the photograph. "I made a mistake, the worst mistake of my life, and I've spent 30 years paying for it." He told Rachel the story slowly, pausing often to collect himself. James had been a mechanic, working long hours at an auto shop to provide for his family. Marcus's mother, Diana, had left when Marcus was only 5 years old, unable to handle the pressures of single motherhood. It had been just James and Marcus after that, father and son against the world. But the story was more complicated than that simple summary suggested. Diana hadn't just left because of pressure. She had left because James's father, William Thompson, had been a dark presence in their lives. William had become a father at 18 himself, forced to marry James's mother when she got pregnant. He had spent his entire life bitter and resentful, drinking heavily, barely working, making everyone around him miserable. William used to tell James, even as a small child, that having a kid ruined his life, that he could have been somebody if he hadn't been trapped by responsibility, that James was the reason he drank, the reason he was unhappy, the reason his dreams died. William drank himself to death when James was only 19, and James had promised himself he would never become his father. When Diana got pregnant with Marcus, James was terrified. What if he carried the same bitterness? What if he resented his son the way his father had resented him? He worked constantly, partly to provide, but partly to prove to himself that he could be different, that he could be a good father through sheer force of will and endless labor. Diana had tried to tell him that being present mattered more than providing, that Marcus needed a father who came to his games, not just one who paid the bills. But James couldn't hear it. He was too busy running from his father's ghost, too busy trying to be everything William Thompson had never been. So Diana left, not because she didn't love Marcus, but because she couldn't watch James work himself to death while their son grew up essentially alone. She left money for Marcus's care, sent cards on his birthday for the first few years, then eventually stopped when James never responded to her attempts at co-parenting. James raised Marcus alone after that, working 70-hour weeks at the auto shop and taking side jobs on weekends. He missed school plays and basketball games, always promising Marcus he'd make the next one. He was exhausted, stressed, trying to be both parents at once while fighting the demons his own father had left him. Marcus grew up quiet and independent, learning to make his own meals by age 7, walking himself to school by age 8, essentially raising himself while his father worked to provide a life better than the one James had known. But what Marcus needed wasn't a better house or newer clothes. He needed his father to be there, to show up, to choose him over work at least sometimes. When Marcus was 18, and preparing to leave for college on a basketball scholarship, he came to James with news that changed everything. He had gotten his girlfriend, Angela, pregnant. She was keeping the baby, and Marcus wanted to do the right thing. Stay home, get a job, help raise his child, give up his scholarship to be the father to his child that James had tried but failed to be to him. James had exploded. All those years of sacrifice, all those hours of work, also Marcus could have opportunities James never had. Also Marcus could escape the cycle of struggle that had defined the Thompson family for generations. And now Marcus wanted to throw it all away to repeat the same pattern, to become a teenage father just like William Thompson had been. The argument was volcanic. Words were said that could never be taken back. James told Marcus he was making the same mistake William had made, that teenage parenthood was a trap, a prison, the death of dreams. Marcus shouted back that at least he was willing to be there for his child, that presence mattered more than paychecks, that he would rather be a poor father who showed up than a rich father who was never home. Then James, exhausted and frustrated and terrified that Marcus would end up like William, bitter, broken, hating his own child, said the words that would haunt him for 3 decades. If you make this choice, you're not my son anymore. Walk out that door, and don't come back. Marcus had looked at his father with tears streaming down his face, with betrayal and hurt and heartbreak written across his features. Then he grabbed his duffel bag and walked out. True to his word, he never came back. James tried to find him in the weeks that followed, but Marcus had disappeared. He didn't answer calls, didn't respond to letters. Years passed. James heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus had married the girl, that they had 2 children, that he had built a good life despite giving up his scholarship. But Marcus never reached out, and James, carrying the weight of shame for the ultimatum he had issued, never pushed hard enough to force a reconciliation. Rachel sat in silence after James finished his story. She had heard many regrets from dying patients, but something about this one cut particularly deep. A father and son, both probably wanting reconciliation, but neither willing to take the first step. And now time was running out. Have you tried to contact him recently? Rachel asked. James shook his head. I wouldn't even know where to start. I heard he moved to another state years ago, changed his phone number. I think he wanted to make sure I couldn't find him. Mr. Thompson, you still have time. If you want to see your son, if you want to apologize, there are ways. I could help you. James looked at her with eyes full of hope and fear. You would do that? Help me find him. Rachel knew she was crossing a professional line. This wasn't part of her job description. Hospital policy was clear about maintaining boundaries with patients. But looking at this dying man, holding a 30-year-old photograph and carrying 3 decades of regret, Rachel couldn't bring herself to say no. I'll try, she promised. Tell me everything you remember about where he might be. Over the next 3 days, Rachel became a detective during her off hours. James remembered that Marcus had moved to Atlanta, that he had gotten a job with a construction company, that his wife's name was Angela. It wasn't much to go on, but Rachel was determined. She started with social media, searching for Marcus Thompson in Atlanta. There were dozens of results. She narrowed it down by age and profession, eventually finding a Marcus Thompson who worked for a construction firm, and whose profile picture showed a man who looked remarkably like the teenage boy in James's photograph, just 30 years older. Rachel's heart raced as she composed a message. She explained who she was, that she was caring for Marcus's father in the hospital, and that James was dying and wanted to see him one last time. She hit send and waited, checking her messages obsessively over the next 24 hours. No response. She tried calling the construction company, but they wouldn't give out personal information. She searched for other family members, finding a phone number for someone who might be Angela Thompson, but the woman who answered said she had the wrong number and hung up. Rachel was running out of options and James was running out of time. His condition was deteriorating faster than expected. The doctors now estimated he had less than a week. On the 4th day, Rachel received a response to her social media message, but it wasn't what she had hoped for. I don't know who you are, or why you think you can contact me about that man, but let me be very clear, I don't have a father. He made that decision 30 years ago, and nothing has changed. Tell him to die with the same peace he gave me when he kicked me out of his house. None at all. Don't contact me again. Rachel read the message 3 times, each word landing like a physical blow. The anger in Marcus's words was palpable, the hurt still raw after 3 decades. This wasn't going to be easy. She thought about leaving it alone, respecting Marcus's wishes, and letting James die without reopening old wounds. But when she went to check on James that evening, she found him awake at 2 a.m., crying quietly, the photograph clutched in his trembling hands. I'm dying, Rachel, he whispered when he saw her. I'm dying and my son hates me. I'm going to leave this world without ever telling him I'm sorry, without ever explaining what really happened, without ever letting him know how much I love him. Rachel sat on the edge of his bed, something she never did with patience, and took his hand. Mr. Thompson, I found Marcus. James's eyes went wide. You did? Where is he? Can he come? He's in Atlanta, like you thought. But James, he's not ready to hear from you yet. He's carrying a lot of anger. Tell me exactly what he said. Rachel hesitated, but James deserved the truth. She read him the message word for word. James closed his eyes, fresh tears rolling down his cheeks. Let him die alone, just like he left me. Those are the words I deserve to hear. I did leave him alone. I chose work over being a father, and when he needed me most, I turned my back on him. There's more to the story, isn't there? Rachel asked gently. You said you wanted to explain what really happened. What does Marcus not know? James was quiet for a long time. Then he began to speak, his voice soft but steady. What Marcus doesn't know is that when Diana left us, she took all our savings with her. I was left with nothing but debt, and a 5-year-old son. I worked those long hours, because we were drowning financially. I missed his games and plays not because I didn't care, but because I was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. He paused, gathering strength to continue. And that night when we fought, when I said those terrible things, I was scared out of my mind. See, my father became a father at 18 too. He stayed, he did the right thing, and he spent his entire life bitter and angry, resenting my mother and resenting me for trapping him. He drank himself to death by the time I was Marcus's age. I was terrified Marcus would end up like my father, full of regret and rage, his potential wasted. Rachel listened, beginning to understand the complexity of what had happened 30 years ago. But Marcus isn't your father, she said quietly. And you're not your father either. You were scared, and you said things you didn't mean. I know that now. I've known it for 30 years, but I was too proud and too ashamed to admit it. And now it's too late. It's not too late, Rachel said firmly. Mr. Thompson, your son needs to hear this. He needs to know you weren't just a cold-hearted man who threw him out. He needs to understand the whole story. He made it clear he doesn't want to hear anything from me. Rachel made a decision in that moment that went against every professional instinct she had developed over 12 years. Then I'll make him listen. The next morning, Rachel did something she had never done before. She called in sick to work, got in her car, and drove 5 hours to Atlanta. She had tracked down Marcus's workplace address, and she was going to talk to him face to face, whether he liked it or not. The drive gave her time to think. As she navigated through morning traffic and onto the highway, Rachel kept replaying James's story in her mind. She thought about her own father, about how similar their situations were. 2 parents and children, separated by pride and misunderstanding. 2 families broken by words that couldn't be taken back. She called her mother from the road. Mom, can I ask you something about Dad? Her mother's voice was cautious. Of course, honey. What is it? Before he died, did he ever say anything about me? About our fight? There was a long pause. Rachel, your father talked about you constantly. He kept every article about you from the nursing school newsletter. He told everyone at the firm that his daughter was saving lives. He was so proud of you. Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. Then why didn't he ever call? Why didn't he tell me? Because he was stubborn. Because he thought you needed to come to him first. Because he was waiting for you to reach out, never realizing that you were waiting for the same thing. Sweetheart, he loved you so much. He just didn't know how to say it after that fight. Rachel pulled over at a rest stop, crying too hard to drive safely. This was why James's case had gotten under her skin. This was why she couldn't let it go. Because James and Marcus had a chance that Rachel and her father never got. They still had time to fix it. She composed herself, got back on the road, and drove the remaining 3 hours with renewed determination. Marcus Thompson worked as a construction foreman for a large development company. Rachel arrived at the job site at 8 a.m., asking workers for Marcus, until someone pointed to a tall black man in a hard hat, reviewing blueprints with his crew. She waited until he was alone, watching him work. He moved with confidence, clearly respected by his team. He had built a good life despite the obstacles, despite giving up his scholarship, despite losing his father. Finally she approached him with her heart pounding. Marcus Thompson. He turned, and Rachel saw immediately that he had his father's eyes. The same kind, thoughtful expression, though currently clouded with confusion. Who are you? My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm the nurse who contacted you about your father. Marcus's expression hardened instantly. I told you not to contact me again. How did you even find me here? This is harassment. Your father is dying. He has maybe 3 or 4 days left. I drove 5 hours to talk to you, because I think you need to hear what I have to say. Lady, I don't know what sob story he told you, but I'm not interested. That man stopped being my father 30 years ago. He told me about the fight. Rachel continued, refusing to be deterred. About the ultimatum. About you choosing to stay and raise your child instead of taking the scholarship. Then you know exactly what kind of man he is. He gave me an ultimatum. My child or him. What kind of father does that? Rachel took a deep breath. A scared one. A broken one. One who was terrified you would repeat his father's mistakes. What are you talking about? Did you ever meet your grandfather? William Thompson. Marcus shook his head. He died before I was born. Your grandfather became a father at 18. He resented it for his entire life. He drank, he was abusive. He told your father constantly that having a child ruined his life. He died of alcoholism before he turned 40. Marcus's expression flickered with something: surprise, maybe, or recognition. Your father grew up being told every day that he was a burden, a mistake, the reason his father's life was miserable. When you told him you were going to be a teenage father, all he could see was history repeating itself. He was terrified you would end up like William, bitter, resentful, hating your own child. That still doesn't excuse what he said. You're absolutely right. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Your father spent your entire childhood trying not to become his father. He worked those long hours, because when you were born, your mother Diana took all their savings and left. Did you know that? Did you know they were nearly homeless? Did you know he was working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over your head? Marcus turned away, but Rachel could see his shoulders shaking slightly. He wasn't absent because he didn't love you, Marcus. He was absent because he was terrified that if he wasn't working every possible hour, you'd end up like he did. Poor trapped with a father who resented you. He was trying to give you opportunities he never had. He just didn't realize that what you needed most was for him to be there. He should have been there, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I needed him at my games. I needed him at my plays. I needed him to tell me he was proud of me. He was proud of you. He is proud of you, and he wants to tell you that himself. But Marcus, he has maybe 72 hours left to live. If you want to hear him say he's sorry, if you want to tell him about your life, about your children, about how you proved him wrong by being a wonderful father yourself, you need to come now. Marcus turned back to face her, tears now visible in his eyes. How do you know I'm a good father? Because you gave up a scholarship to be there for your child. Because you made a choice your father couldn't understand, but that took incredible courage. Because you learned from his mistakes instead of repeating them. I have 3 kids, Marcus said quietly. 2 daughters and a son. My son is 19 now, the same age I was when I left. Last month he told me he got a girl pregnant. You want to know what I said to him? Rachel waited. I told him I'd support whatever decision he made. If he wanted to go to college, I'd help with the baby. If he wanted to stay home and be a father, I'd help him find a good job. I told him becoming a parent young is hard, but it doesn't have to ruin your life if you have support. I told him I loved him no matter what he chose. Because you learned from your father's mistake, Rachel said softly. I learned what not to do. I learned that ultimatums don't work. I learned that being there matters more than providing things. I learned all of that because of what my father did wrong. Then your father succeeded in one thing. He taught you to be better than he was. Don't you think he deserves to know that? Don't you think he deserves to know that his biggest fear, that you'd end up like his father, never came true? That you broke the cycle he couldn't break? Marcus stood silent for a long moment, tears now streaming freely down his face. Rachel could see the war happening inside him. 30 years of hurt and anger battling against the truth she had revealed, against the understanding that his father's actions had come from trauma and fear rather than cruelty. I've spent 30 years hating him, Marcus said finally. 30 years telling myself I was better off without him. 30 years building a wall around the pain of being rejected by my own father. I don't know if I can just tear that wall down because you show up and tell me he had reasons. I'm not asking you to tear down the wall. I'm asking you to make a door in it, just for a few hours, just long enough to let him say what he needs to say, and for you to hear it. You don't have to forgive him. You don't have to forget what happened. But Marcus, if you don't come, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what he might have said. You'll carry that question forever. How do you know? Rachel's voice cracked. Because I lost my father 15 years ago after a fight we never resolved. Because he died suddenly, and I never got to tell him I loved him despite our differences. Because I've carried that regret every single day since. Because I became a nurse partly to make sure other people don't have to live with that same burden. Marcus looked at her with new understanding. This isn't just about my father, is it? No, Rachel admitted. It's about mine too. But Marcus, you have something I'll never have. You have time. Not much, but enough. Enough to say goodbye properly. Enough to get answers to the questions that have haunted you for 30 years. Enough to let your children meet their grandfather and understand where they come from. Please don't throw that away. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, and Rachel could only hear his side, but she could tell Angela was supporting whatever decision Marcus made. She heard him say, "I know, baby, and he's dying, and she drove 5 hours to find me, and finally, I think I need to do this." When he hung up, he looked at Rachel with exhaustion and determination in his eyes. "I'll follow you back. Angela's going to bring the kids and meet us there. If I'm doing this, they're coming too. My father left me without saying goodbye. If he's leaving this world, my children will know their grandfather, even if only for a few hours." The drive back to County General took 5 hours, and Rachel spent the entire time praying that James would hold on long enough. She called the hospital twice to check on him, and both times the nurses reported his condition was declining rapidly. They arrived at the hospital at 6 p.m. Rachel led Marcus through the familiar hallways past the nurses' station where her colleagues looked at her with surprise, having expected her to be homesick. They stopped outside room 304. Marcus stood frozen, his hand trembling as he reached toward the door handle. "I haven't seen him in 30 years, Marcus whispered. "What if I can't handle it? What if all that anger comes back?" "Then it comes back," Rachel said gently. "But at least you'll have tried. At least you'll know you gave him the chance to say goodbye." Marcus took a deep breath and pushed open the door. James was asleep, or unconscious. Rachel couldn't tell which. He looked frailer than he had just that morning. His breathing labored, his skin gray. The photo of young Marcus lay on his chest, rising and falling with each difficult breath. Marcus stood in the doorway seeing his father for the first time in 3 decades. Rachel watched as Marcus's face went through a dozen emotions: shock at how old James looked, grief at seeing him so sick, and something else Rachel couldn't quite identify. "Dad?" Marcus's voice cracked on the word. James's eyes fluttered open. For a moment he seemed confused, not sure if he was dreaming. Then his eyes focused on the tall man standing in his doorway and understanding dawned. "Marcus? Is that really you?" "Yeah, Dad. It's me." Marcus walked slowly to the bedside. Rachel stepped back, giving them space, but stayed close enough to hear. "You came," James whispered, tears already streaming down his face. "I didn't think you would come. I almost didn't. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for anything, son. Everything that happened was my fault. Nurse Rachel told me some things, about Mom taking the money. About your father. Things I didn't know. Nothing excuses what I said to you that night. Nothing. I should have been there for you. I should have supported you. I should have told you that whatever decision you made, I would stand by you." Marcus sat in the chair beside the bed, and Rachel could see his hands shaking. "I need to know something. Did you mean it, when you said I wasn't your son anymore?" "No," James said immediately, emphatically. "God, no. Marcus, you have always been my son. You will always be my son. Even when I couldn't see you, even when I didn't know where you were always in my heart. I was angry and scared, and I said the worst thing I could possibly say, but I never meant it. Not for 1 second. I waited for you to come after me." Marcus said, his own tears now falling. "I waited for weeks thinking you would show up and tell me you were sorry. When you didn't, I thought you really did want nothing to do with me. I did come looking for you. I called everyone. I drove around for hours, but you had made it clear you wanted me gone from your life, and I thought maybe you were better off without me. I thought maybe I had hurt you too much to ever fix it." Marcus reached out and took his father's hand, a gesture so tender that Rachel had to look away to hide her own tears. "I was never better off without you," Marcus said. "I spent 30 years angry at you, but I was never better off. I needed my dad. My kids needed their grandfather. Tell me about them," James said, squeezing Marcus's hand. "Please tell me about your children. Tell me about your life. Tell me everything I missed." And Marcus did. He talked for the next 2 hours, telling his father about Angela, about how they had struggled at first, but built a good life together, about working construction while Angela worked as a teacher, about buying their first small house when the girls were little, about the lean years and the good years and everything in between. He told him about his daughters, Sarah and Jennifer. Sarah was studying to be a doctor, following in Rachel's footsteps in a way. Jennifer was an artist, painting murals around Atlanta that celebrated Black history and culture. Both were strong, independent women who knew their worth. And he told him about James Jr., named after the grandfather he had never met. "I was still angry at you," Marcus admitted, "but I couldn't forget you. When Angela and I talked about names, I kept coming back to James. Part of me always hoped we'd fix this someday. I wanted my son to carry your name, even if you never knew him." James wept openly. "You named him after me. After everything I did, you're still my father. Even when I hated you, even when I told myself I was better off without you, you were still my father. And I wanted my son to have that connection to his roots, to his history, even if that history was complicated." They talked about Marcus's life, about how he had worked his way up from laborer to foreman, about the houses he had helped build, the crews he had led. James listened with pride and sorrow, mixing on his face pride at the man Marcus had become, sorrow at all he had missed. I should have been there, James said repeatedly. I should have been at your wedding. I should have been there when your children were born. I should have been the grandfather who taught them to fix cars, and told them stories about their father when he was young. You're right, you should have been there, and I'm not going to pretend that doesn't hurt, but you know what hurts more? The thought of leaving this room and going back to my life, without ever having this conversation. The thought of you dying alone, thinking I hated you, never knowing how my life turned out. James reached out with a trembling hand and touched Marcus's face, as if making sure he was real. You turned out perfect, despite me, despite everything. You turned out perfect, not despite you, because of you. Everything I learned about what not to do as a father, I learned from watching you. And you know what else I learned? That you were doing the best you could with what you had. That you were carrying trauma from your own father that you didn't know how to process. That sometimes people hurt the ones they love, not because they want to, but because they don't know how to stop the cycle. Rachel watched from her corner, tears streaming down her face. This was why she had become a nurse, not for the medical procedures, or the clinical skills, but for moments like this. Moments when healing happened not through medicine, but through words, through truth, through the courage to be vulnerable. Can I meet them? James asked. Your children, is there time? Marcus looked at Rachel. Mrs. Thompson's condition is very unstable, Rachel said carefully, but if your family can come quickly, there might be time. Marcus pulled out his phone. Angela was already on the road with the kids, about an hour away. They had started driving the moment Marcus called to say he was going to see his father. They'll be here soon, Marcus said. My whole family will be here. The family you never got to know, but who are part of you anyway. James and Marcus talked while they waited, filling in 30 years of gaps. James asked about Marcus's wedding, and Marcus described it. A small ceremony in Angela's church. Nothing fancy, but filled with love. James asked about the births of his grandchildren, and Marcus told him about each one. The fear, the joy, the overwhelming sense of responsibility. When James Jr. was born, Marcus said, I finally understood what you must have felt when I was born. That terror of being responsible for another human being. That fear of failing them. That desperate need to be enough. And were you enough? I tried to be. I made mistakes, plenty of them, but I was there. Every school play, every basketball game, every moment I could be, because I remembered how much it hurt when you weren't there, and I was determined my kids would never feel that. The door opened and Angela walked in, followed by 2 young women and a young man. Rachel recognized James Jr. immediately. He looked exactly like the photo of teenage Marcus that his father still clutched. Dad, Marcus said, standing. This is my family. This is Angela, my wife, and these are our children. Angela approached the bed cautiously. She was a beautiful woman in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Mr. Thompson, I'm glad we finally get to meet. You're the woman who my son gave up everything for, James said weakly. And I've spent every day trying to be worthy of that sacrifice, Angela replied. Marcus is the best father I've ever seen. Whatever he learned from you, it made him into an incredible man. Sarah, the medical student, approached next. She had her grandmother Diana's features, mixed with her father's strength. Grandpa, I'm Sarah. I'm studying to be a doctor. A doctor, James repeated with wonder. Your father gave up his scholarship, and his daughter is going to be a doctor. That's beautiful. Jennifer, the artist, showed him photos of her murals on her phone. I paint stories, she explained. Stories about people like us, black families, our struggles and our triumphs. I'd like to paint your story someday, if that's okay. My story. James looked surprised. A man who made mistakes but raised a son, who became amazing. A grandfather I never knew, but who shaped my family anyway. That's worth painting. And then James Jr. stepped forward. He was tall, athletic, 19 years old, and carrying himself with a confidence that came from being loved unconditionally. Grandpa, he said uncertainly. James looked at his grandson, and fresh tears spilled over. You look just like your father did, just like the picture I've been carrying all these years. James Jr. approached the bed cautiously. Dad told me what happened between you two. He told me on the drive here, and I want you to know something. I'm going to be a father. My girlfriend is pregnant. The room went silent. Marcus closed his eyes, perhaps reliving his own moment of revelation 30 years earlier. And you want to know what my dad said when I told him? James Jr. continued. He said he loved me. He said he'd support any decision I made. He said becoming a parent, young is hard but beautiful, and he'd help me every step of the way. He didn't give me ultimatums or conditions. He just loved me. James Jr.'s voice cracked. And that's because of you, Grandpa. Because you showed him what not to do. And he learned from it. So even though I never knew you until today, you shaped the kind of father I had, and I'm grateful for that. James couldn't speak. He just reached out his hand, and James Jr. took it. They waited together, father and son, talking about everything and nothing. James apologized 100 times, and each time Marcus said he understood, that he forgave him, that they couldn't change the past, but they could choose how to spend the time they had left. At 11:45 p.m., a young man who looked exactly like Marcus had at 18, walked into room 304. He was tall, athletic, with the same kind eyes that seemed to run in the Thompson family. Grandpa, he said uncertainly. James looked at his grandson, and fresh tears spilled over. You look just like your father did, just like the picture I've been carrying all these years. James Jr. approached the bed cautiously. Dad told me what happened between you two. I'm glad you're getting to meet before. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Before I die, James said with a gentle smile. It's okay to say it. I'm dying, but I'm dying happy now. Because I got to see my son again. Because I got to meet you. Because I got to know that even though I made terrible mistakes, somehow my son turned out to be a better man than I ever was. They talked until nearly 2 a.m. 3 generations of Thompson men sharing stories and tears and laughter. Rachel stayed with them, forgetting entirely about professional boundaries, caught up in the beauty of this reunion that almost never happened. At 2:30 a.m., James's breathing became more labored. The monitors started beeping warnings. Rachel knew what was coming. Marcus, James said weakly, struggling to form words. There are 3 words I should have said 30 years ago. 3 words I should have said every day. I love you. I have always loved you. And I am so proud of you. Marcus held his father's hand tightly, his son standing beside him with a hand on his shoulder. 3 generations connected. I love you too, Dad. And I forgive you for everything. James smiled, peaceful for the first time in 30 years. His eyes moved from Marcus to James Jr. and back again. You gave me my grandson. You built a beautiful family. You proved that breaking the cycle was possible. You're everything I hoped you would be. Those were the last words James Thompson spoke. He closed his eyes, still holding Marcus's hand, and slipped away quietly as the sun began to rise over County General Hospital. Rachel had seen many deaths in her 12 years as a nurse, but this was the first time she had seen someone die truly at peace. James left this world surrounded by love, having said the words that needed to be said, having received the forgiveness he desperately needed. The funeral was 3 days later. Rachel attended, surprising herself. She never went to patients' funerals, but this felt different. This felt personal. Marcus introduced her to Angela, to his daughters, to other family members who had missed James over the years. He introduced her as the woman who saved our family. I didn't save anyone, Rachel protested. I just delivered a message. You did more than that, Marcus said firmly. You made me listen when I didn't want to. You drove 5 hours to tell me things I needed to hear. You gave my father and me a gift we thought we'd lost forever. The chance to say goodbye properly, to forgive, to love each other again before it was too late. After the service, as people were leaving, James Jr. approached Rachel. My dad told me what you did, how you tracked him down, how you drove to Atlanta, how you convinced him to come. I never got to know my grandfather before, but because of you I got 3 days with him. 3 days doesn't sound like much, but they were the most important 3 days of my life. Why do you say that? Rachel asked. Because I got to see what forgiveness looks like. I got to see what happens when people choose love over pride. I got to see my dad and grandfather heal a 30-year wound in 72 hours. And I learned that it's never too late to say you're sorry. Never too late to choose family over anger. Rachel thought about those words as she drove home that evening. She had broken every professional rule. She had gotten emotionally involved. She had driven 5 hours on her day off to track down a patient's estranged son. She had acted more like family than like a healthcare professional, and she would do it again in a heartbeat. 3 weeks after James's death, Rachel received a letter at the hospital. It was from Marcus, and inside was a photo. The image showed 4 generations of Thompson men, the original photo of James and teenage Marcus, and beside it, a new photo of Marcus and James Jr. in the same pose, arms around each other's shoulders. The letter read, "Dear Rachel, thank you for giving me my father back, even if only for a few days. Thank you for not giving up when I told you to leave me alone. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, it's about refusing to let the past destroy the future. I've enclosed a photo. On the left is my father and me when I was 16. The last good day we had together. On the right is me and my son now, trying to honor the same love and connection, but doing it better this time. My father's last wish wasn't just to see me again. It was to know that the cycle of hurt could be broken, that his mistakes didn't doom our family to repeat the same patterns. By bringing us back together, you helped him see that his greatest fear, that I would become bitter like his father, never came true. You helped him die at peace. You are a remarkable person, Rachel Morgan. You didn't just care for my father's body in his final days. You cared for his soul, and in doing so, you healed our entire family. With eternal gratitude, Marcus Thompson." Rachel kept that letter in her locker at work. On difficult days, when she felt burned out or questioned why she had chosen nursing, she would read it and remember why this work mattered. She had made a promise to a dying man, find his son, but in keeping that promise, she had done something much more important. She had proven that it's never too late for forgiveness, never too late to say the words that need to be said, never too late to choose love over pride. James Thompson's final wish had been simple: to see his son, and say 3 words, "I love you." But those 3 words spoken at the right moment, had the power to heal 30 years of hurt and change the course of an entire family's future. 6 months after James's death, Rachel received another piece of mail at the hospital. This time it was an invitation to James Jr.'s college graduation. Across the top, Marcus had written, "My father would have wanted you there. You're part of our family now." Rachel attended the graduation, sitting with Angela and Marcus's daughters. When James Jr. walked across the stage to receive his diploma, Marcus stood and cheered, louder than anyone in the auditorium. After the ceremony, as they all gathered for photos, James Jr. pulled Rachel aside. "I want to be a nurse," he told her. "Because of you. Because I saw how much impact one person can have by choosing to care, by choosing to go beyond what's required, by choosing to see patients as people instead of just cases." Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He is proud. I can feel it. And you know what? I'm going to make the same promise you made. When I become a nurse, I'm going to remember that sometimes the most important medicine isn't in a pill or a procedure. Sometimes it's in a promise kept, a hand held, or a family reunited." That evening, Rachel drove home thinking about the chain of events that had started with a dying man's whisper. "Promise me you'll find him." One promise, one choice to go beyond professional boundaries, one decision to help a father and son find their way back to each other. And now, because of that promise, a new nurse would enter the profession, carrying forward the lesson that healing isn't just about bodies. It's about hearts and souls, and the precious, fragile connections between people who love each other, but sometimes forget how to show it. Rachel Morgan had kept her promise to James Thompson, but the promise had given her something in return, a reminder that sometimes the most important rules to break are the ones that keep us from being fully human with each other. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is the chance to say the words they need to say before it's too late. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that words matter. The words we speak and the words we leave unspoken both have power. James Thompson lived 30 years with the weight of words he regretted saying, and words he never got the chance to say. But because one nurse chose to care enough to break the rules, because one son chose forgiveness over anger, those words finally got spoken. If there's someone in your life you need to forgive, someone you need to apologize to, someone you need to tell you love them, don't wait. Don't let pride or fear or time steal your opportunity to say what needs to be said. Because as James and Marcus Thompson learned, it's never too late for forgiveness, but someday it will be, someday time will run out. And the only question that will matter is, did you say the words while you still could? If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Heart Told Stories for more incredible true narratives about love, loss, and the power of choosing connection over conflict. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that forgiveness is always possible, and that 3 words "I love you" can change everything. Thank you for watching, and remember, keep your promises, speak your truth, and never let the sun set on words left unspoken.